The sound of rotting wood groaning beneath her weight had become as familiar to Diana Sinclair as her own heartbeat, though far less reassuring in the cold November night of 1883. She pulled the threadbare blanket tighter around her shoulders, watching her breath form small clouds in the abandoned barn where she had been hiding for 3 weeks, ever since Thomas had stumbled home drunk for the last time, confessed what he had done, and disappeared into the Arizona darkness with nothing but the clothes on his back and shame hanging heavy on his cowardly shoulders. The barn sat 2 miles outside Vulture City, a gold mining town that had seen better days but still clung to life like a desperate man clutching fool's gold. Deanna had discovered this place by accident during one of her long walks when Thomas was losing their savings at the card tables, back when she still had hoped that he might change. Now it served as her shelter, though the November wind cut through the gaps in the walls like knives, and she had nothing but a few canned goods she had managed to save before the bank came to claim their house. She was 24 years old, and her life had crumbled like dried clay in her hands. Thomas Sinclair had been charming once, back in Missouri where they had met 4 years ago. He had promised her adventure, a new life out west where they could build something together. Deanna had believed him, had married him in a small church ceremony that her mother had protested with tears streaming down her weathered face. Her mother had seen something in Thomas that Deanna, blinded by youth and romance, had missed entirely. The weakness in his jaw, perhaps, or the way his eyes never quite met anyone's gaze when money was discussed. They had made it to Arizona 2 years ago, and for a while, things had been good. Thomas found work at one of the smaller mines, and Diana took in sewing and laundry. They rented a small house on the edge of Vulture City, nothing fancy but clean and theirs, or so she had thought. Thomas had somehow convinced the owner to sell it to them with a small down payment and monthly installments. Deanna had been so proud, had scrubbed every corner of that house until it shined, had planted flowers in the small garden out front. Then Thomas discovered poker. At first, it was just Friday nights with the boys from the mine. Then it became Fridays and Saturdays. Then every night he was not working, and sometimes nights when he should have been working. Deanna watched their savings evaporate like water on hot stone. She begged, she pleaded, she screamed, she cried. Nothing worked. Thomas would promise to stop, would be good for a week or two. Then she would smell the whiskey on his breath and see that familiar, desperate gleam in his eyes, and she would know he had been back at the tables. The final blow came 3 weeks ago. Thomas had staggered home just before dawn, his face ashen, his hands shaking. He told her through tears that he had gambled away the house itself, had put up the deed in a game with a territorial politician passing through town, convinced that his 3 kings would beat anything. But the politician had 4 tens, and just like that, everything was gone. Diana had stood in their bedroom, unable to breathe, unable to think. Before she could fully process what he had said, Thomas had packed a small bag and headed for the door. She had grabbed his arm, demanded to know where he was going, what they were going to do. He had looked at her then with eyes full of self-loathing and cowardice, pulled his arm free, and said the words that still echoed in her mind during the long, sleepless nights. "I cannot face what I have done, Deanna. I cannot look at you knowing I have destroyed everything. I am leaving, and I am not coming back." Then he was gone, disappearing into the pre-dawn darkness like a ghost, leaving her alone with nothing but the clothes on her back and a disaster she had not created but was forced to endure. The banker had arrived the next day, apologetic but firm. The house now belonged to the politician, who had already sold it to a merchant family arriving from California. She had 1 day to collect her things and leave. Deanna had packed what little she could carry, taken what small amount of food she could justify, and walked out of Vulture City before anyone could see her shame. She could not bear to stay in town, could not face the pitying looks or the whispered gossip. She had no family in Arizona, no close friends who might take her in without asking questions she did not want to answer. Her pride, perhaps foolish but all she had left, would not allow her to become the object of charity or scorn. So she had come here, to this forgotten barn that leaned slightly to the left and smelled of old hay and mouse droppings. It kept out most of the rain when the occasional storm rolled through, and it hid her from the world while she tried to figure out what to do next. Her options were painfully limited. She had no money, no home, and winter was coming to the high desert. While Arizona winters were not as brutal as Missouri's, the nights could be bitterly cold, and she had no proper shelter. She needed work, but most of the respectable positions in town required references or connections she did not have. The thought of other types of work, the kind desperate women sometimes turned to, made her stomach turn with revulsion and fear. Deanna had been raised properly, had been taught to sew and cook and keep a home. Her father had been a clerk, her mother a homemaker. They had not been wealthy, but they had been respectable. Deanna had always imagined she would have that same life, that she would raise children in a loving home with a reliable husband. Instead, she was 24 years old, abandoned and sleeping in a barn like an animal. She had been rationing her food carefully, but supplies were running desperately low. Tomorrow, she would have to venture into town and try to find some kind of work, no matter how her pride protested. Starvation was a more immediate concern than shame. Deanna lay down on the pile of old hay she had gathered into a makeshift bed, pulled the blanket up to her chin, and closed her eyes. Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by cold and hunger and the sounds of the desert night. She did not hear the horse approaching until it was nearly at the barn. The sound of hooves on hard, packed earth jolted Deanna awake just as the first gray light of dawn was creeping through the gaps in the barn walls. Her heart hammered against her ribs as panic flooded through her. Someone was coming. She had been found. Deanna scrambled to her feet, clutching her blanket around her shoulders, her mind racing through impossible options. She could try to hide in the loft, but the ladder was partially broken and would make noise. She could run, but where would she go? Before she could decide, the barn door creaked open and a figure stepped inside, silhouetted against the pale morning light. "Easy now," a deep voice said, calm and steady. "I am not here to hurt you." The man stepped further into the barn, and Deanna could make out more details. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and a lean build that spoke of hard work and harder living. He wore typical cowboy attire, dusty boots, worn denim pants, a work shirt, and a leather vest. A hat sat low on his head, shadowing his face, but she could see the strong line of his jaw and the way he held himself with quiet confidence. "This is private property," Deanna said, trying to keep her voice steady despite her fear. "You are trespassing." The cowboy pushed his hat back slightly, and she could see his face properly now. He was younger than she had first thought, probably not more than 27 or 28, with tanned skin, sharp features, and eyes that were a startling shade of blue-green, like creek water in summer. There was something honest in those eyes, something that made her slightly less afraid, though she kept her guard up. "Actually, madam, I am not trespassing," he said, his voice carrying a hint of apology. "This barn belongs to the ranch I work for, the Copper Creek Ranch. I ride out this way every few weeks to check on the property and the fences." He paused, studying her with those keen eyes. "I was not expecting to find anyone living here." Deanna felt her face flush with embarrassment and anger, though the anger was not really directed at him. I did not know it belonged to anyone. It looked abandoned. It mostly is, the cowboy agreed. The owner does not use it anymore since he built a new one closer to the main ranch house, but that does not change the fact that you are staying on his land. He tilted his head slightly and his expression softened. You look like you have been here a while, and like you have not eaten properly in some time. Deanna lifted her chin, trying to hold on to what little dignity she had left. I am fine. I will be on my way. I apologize for the intrusion. She moved to gather her few belongings, but her legs, stiff from the cold night and weakened from hunger, betrayed her. She stumbled and the cowboy moved quickly, catching her elbow to steady her. His hand was warm and calloused, strong but surprisingly gentle. When did you last eat? He asked, his tone more concerned than judgmental. I have food, Deanna said, pulling away from his grasp. She did not want his pity, could not bear it. The cowboy glanced around the barn, taking in her meager pile of belongings, the nearly empty tin of beans sitting beside her makeshift bed, the threadbare blanket. His jaw tightened slightly, and Deanna could not tell if it was with anger or something else. My name is Nathan Overby, he said finally. I work as a ranch hand at Copper Creek, have been there about 5 years now, and you are, Deanna hesitated. Giving her name felt like admitting defeat, like making this situation real in a way it had not been when she was just a nameless woman hiding in a barn. But there was something about Nathan Overby's steady gaze that made lying seem impossible. Diana Sinclair, she said quietly. Nathan nodded slowly, as if committing the name to memory. Well, Mrs. Sinclair, I think we need to have a conversation about your situation. But not here, and not while you are half frozen and hungry. Will you come back to the ranch with me? My boss's wife is a good woman and she would want to help. I do not need charity, Deanna said quickly, the words coming out sharper than she intended. I did not offer charity, Nathan replied, his tone still patient. I offered a conversation and a hot meal. Seems to me like you are in a difficult spot, and I might be able to help. But I cannot do that if you collapse from hunger or freeze to death out here. Diana wanted to refuse, wanted to cling to her pride and her independence, but the truth was inescapable. She was out of options, out of food, and out of time. Winter was coming, and she would not survive it living in this barn. If she was going to die anyway, she might as well die with a full stomach. Just a meal, she said finally, and then I will be on my way. Nathan nodded, and something that might have been relief crossed his face. Just a meal, he agreed. Come on, my horse is outside. We can ride double back to the ranch. Deanna gathered her few belongings into a small bundle, wrapping them in her blanket. Nathan waited patiently by the door, not rushing her, not making her feel more ashamed than she already did. When she was ready, he led her outside to where his horse, a sturdy bay gelding, stood waiting. The morning sun was just beginning to crest the horizon, painting the desert landscape in shades of gold and orange. In different circumstances, Deanna might have found it beautiful. Now, exhausted and frightened and uncertain, she could barely appreciate it. Nathan mounted his horse with easy grace, then extended a hand down to Deanna. She hesitated only a moment before taking it, allowing him to pull her up behind him. She had to put her arms around his waist to keep from falling, and she could feel the solid warmth of him through his shirt, could smell leather and soap and horse and something else, something clean and masculine that was just him. Hold on tight, Nathan said, and then they were moving, the horse's gait smooth and steady as they headed away from the abandoned barn and toward whatever future awaited her. The ride to Copper Creek Ranch took about 30 minutes, the horse maintaining a steady pace across the rugged Arizona terrain. Deanna tried not to think about how close she was pressed against Nathan Overby's back, tried not to notice the way his muscles moved beneath his shirt as he guided the horse, tried not to feel grateful for the warmth he provided against the crisp morning air. She had been married, had shared a bed with a man, but Thomas had never felt like this. Thomas had always seemed somehow insubstantial, as if a strong wind might blow him away. Nathan Overby felt solid, permanent, like the desert mountains rising in the distance. Deanna pushed the thought away, disgusted with herself. Her husband had abandoned her less than a month ago, and here she was noticing another man. What kind of person did that make her? The ranch, when it came into view, was larger than Deanna had expected. A sprawling main house sat at the center, built of adobe and wood, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front and side. Outbuildings dotted the property, including a large stable, a bunkhouse, and what looked like a workshop. Fences stretched out in all directions, enclosing pastures where cattle grazed peacefully in the morning sun. Nathan guided his horse toward the main house, where an older woman stood on the porch, shading her eyes against the sun as she watched their approach. She was perhaps 50, with gray-streaked brown hair pulled back in a practical bun and a face that was lined but kind. "Nathan Overby, who have you brought home?" The woman called out as they drew closer. "Found her staying in the old barn, Mrs. Porter," Nathan called back. He dismounted, then helped Deanna down, his hands steadying her when her legs wobbled slightly. "This is Deanna Sinclair. She is in need of a meal and maybe a kind word or two." Mrs. Porter came down the porch steps, her expression shifting from curious to concerned as she took in Deanna's appearance. Deanna could only imagine what she looked like after 3 weeks of sleeping in a barn, rationing food, and washing only occasionally in the cold stream that ran nearby. "Oh, you poor dear," Mrs. Porter said, her voice full of genuine sympathy. "Come inside right now. Nathan, you go take care of your horse and then get yourself some breakfast in the bunkhouse. I will handle things here." Nathan nodded, but his eyes lingered on Deanna for a moment, something unreadable in his expression. Then he led his horse toward the stable, glancing back only once before disappearing inside. Mrs. Porter took Deanna's arm gently and guided her up the porch steps and into the house. The interior was warm and welcoming, with handmade furniture and colorful woven rugs on the floor. The smell of coffee and bacon filled the air, making Diana's stomach clench with hunger so intense it was almost painful. "Sit down here in the kitchen," Mrs. Porter said, pulling out a chair at a large wooden table. "Let me get you some food first, and then we can talk." Deanna sat, and within minutes, Mrs. Porter had placed before her a plate loaded with scrambled eggs, bacon, fried potatoes, and fresh biscuits. A mug of hot coffee appeared beside it, along with a jar of honey and a small dish of butter. "Eat slowly," Mrs. Porter cautioned. "If you have not been eating properly, you do not want to make yourself sick." Deanna tried to follow the advice, but it was difficult. She had not realized how hungry she was until food was in front of her. She forced herself to take small bites, to chew thoroughly, even though every instinct screamed at her to devour everything as quickly as possible. Mrs. Porter sat across from her, sipping her own coffee, not asking questions, just providing a quiet, comforting presence. It was only after Deanna had finished about half the food on her plate, her desperate hunger beginning to ease into something more manageable, that the older woman finally spoke. "Nathan said he found you in the old barn. How long have you been staying there?" Deanna set down her fork, meeting Mrs. Porter's kind eyes. 3 weeks, she admitted. "Maybe a little more. I have lost track of the days." And before that, Deanna hesitated, then decided there was no point in lying. "I lived in Vulture City with my husband. We had a house." She paused, the words sticking in her throat like broken glass. He gambled it away, put up the deed in a poker game and lost everything. Then he left town, left me with nothing. Mrs. Porter's expression tightened with anger, but Deanna could tell it was not directed at her. What kind of man abandons his wife like that? The coward. I thought about going back to Missouri to my family, Deanna continued, but I do not have money for passage and I could not bear to show up on their doorstep a failure. My mother warned me about Thomas and I did not listen. I thought I knew better. A man's failures are not your shame to carry, Mrs. Porter said firmly. You are not a failure because your husband was weak and selfish. The words, spoken with such certainty, made something crack inside Deanna's chest. Tears welled up in her eyes and she tried to blink them away, but they spilled over anyway, tracking hot paths down her cheeks. She had not cried since the night Thomas left, had not allowed herself to, but now the dam had broken. Mrs. Porter moved around the table and pulled Deanna into a hug, holding her while she sobbed out 3 weeks of fear and shame and loneliness. The older woman did not offer empty platitudes or tell her everything would be fine. She just held her and let her cry, and somehow that was exactly what Deanna needed. When the tears finally subsided, Deanna pulled back, wiping her face with her hands. I apologize. I did not mean to fall apart like that. Crying is not falling apart, Mrs. Porter said. It is what happens when you have been strong for too long. Now, let us talk about what comes next. I need to find work, Deanna said. I can sew, I can cook, I can clean. I am willing to do just about anything respectable. Mrs. Porter nodded thoughtfully. I might have a solution, if you are interested. My husband and I run this ranch with about 10 cowboys who stay in the bunkhouse. I do the cooking and cleaning for the main house, but I have been wanting help with the bunkhouse. The men do their own laundry and basic cleaning, but they need someone to cook proper meals and keep the place from becoming a complete disaster. I am getting too old to handle both houses. Deanna felt a flicker of hope. You are offering me a job. I am offering you a job and a place to stay, Mrs. Porter confirmed. There is a small room attached to the back of the bunkhouse, originally meant for a foreman, but we have never had one. It has a bed, a stove, and a wash basin. Nothing fancy, but it is clean and warm and private. You would cook 3 meals a day for the cowboys, keep the bunkhouse tidy, and handle their laundry. In return, you get room, board, and a monthly wage. Not a fortune, but enough to save up if you are careful. Deanna could hardly believe what she was hearing. It was more than she had dared hope for, a genuine solution to her desperate situation. Why would you help me like this? You do not know anything about me. I know that Nathan brought you here and that boy has good instincts about people, Mrs. Porter said. I know that you have been through something terrible and that you are trying to survive it with dignity. And I know that I need help and you need work. Seems like a fair arrangement to me. Deanna felt tears threatening again, but these were different, born of relief and gratitude rather than despair. I would be honored to accept your offer, Mrs. Porter. Thank you. Call me a leaner, the older woman said with a warm smile. Now finish your breakfast, and then we will get you settled in your new room. You look like you could use a proper bath and some rest before you start work. Deanna did as she was told, finishing the food on her plate while a leaner bustled around the kitchen, chattering about the ranch and the cowboys and what the job would entail. It all felt surreal, like a dream Deanna might wake from at any moment to find herself back in the cold barn with an empty stomach and no prospects. But it was real. Eleanor led her out of the main house and across the yard to the bunkhouse, a long, low building with a porch running along the front. The main room was large and somewhat chaotic, with bunks lining the walls and personal belongings scattered about. It smelled of leather and tobacco and unwashed men, but it was not as bad as Deanna had feared. "The men are all out working now," Alina explained. "They start early and come back for lunch around noon, then work until dinner. You will get used to the schedule quickly enough." She led Deanna through the bunkhouse to a door at the far end, which opened into a small but surprisingly cozy room. There was a narrow bed with a real mattress, a small cast iron stove, a table with 2 chairs, a wash basin on a stand, and even a wardrobe for clothes. A single window looked out over the desert landscape. "It is not much," Alina said apologetically. "It is perfect," Deanna said, and she meant it. After 3 weeks in a barn, this room looked like paradise. Alina left her with soap and towels and instructions to heat water on the stove for a bath. There was a large tin tub hanging on the wall that could be filled and used in the privacy of the room. Deanna had not had a proper bath in weeks, and the thought made her almost giddy with anticipation. It took several trips to the pump outside to fill the tub, and heating the water on the small stove took time, but Deanna did not mind. The work gave her something to focus on besides the overwhelming relief that was making her feel almost light-headed. She had a job. She had a place to live. She was going to be all right. When the bath was finally ready, Deanna stripped off her filthy clothes and sank into the warm water with a sigh of pure bliss. She scrubbed herself thoroughly, washing away 3 weeks of dirt and fear. She washed her hair twice, working out the tangles and grime until it felt clean again. By the time she climbed out of the tub and dried off, she felt more human than she had in weeks. Her clothes were still dirty, but Alina had promised to find her something clean to wear until her own things could be laundered. Deanna dressed in the clothes Alina had left for her, simple but clean work dress that was only slightly too large, and sat on the bed to brush out her damp hair. The bed was soft beneath her, so much better than the pile of hay she had been sleeping on. She lay back, just for a moment, just to appreciate the comfort of it. She was asleep within seconds. Deanna woke to the sound of voices and boots on wooden floorboards. For a moment, disoriented, she could not remember where she was. Then it all came back in a rush. The barn, Nathan Overby, Alina Porter, the job. She sat up quickly, running her hands through her now dry hair, trying to smooth it down. The light coming through the window had changed, and she realized with dismay that she had slept for hours. It was nearly noon. She hurried out of her room into the main bunkhouse, and found Alina there with a large basket of bread and what looked like a pot of stew. Several cowboys were milling about, washing up at the basin near the door and settling onto benches at the long table that dominated the center of the room. "Deanna, perfect timing," Alina said with a smile. "I handled lunch today since you were resting, but starting tomorrow, this will be your responsibility. Let me introduce you to the men." Deanna felt suddenly self-conscious as 10 pairs of eyes turned toward her with varying degrees of curiosity. She recognized Nathan immediately, standing near the window with his hat in his hands. He met her gaze and gave her a small nod, something that might have been encouragement. Alina went around the room, rattling off names. There was Pete, the oldest hand at nearly 50, with a gray beard and kind eyes. Jake and Johnny were brothers, both in their early 20s with matching grins. Sam was tall and lanky, quiet and serious. There were others, too, all of them polite, if a bit rough around the edges. "Deanna will be taking over cooking and cleaning duties here in the bunkhouse," Alina announced. "I expect you all to treat her with respect. Any man who does not can answer to Mr. Porter and to me. Understood?" There was a chorus of "Yes, madam" from the assembled cowboys, and Deanna felt some of her nervousness ease. These were working men, tired and hungry, but they did not seem threatening. Eleanor served the stew while Deanna helped distribute the bread. And then the men fell to eating with the single-minded focus of people who had been doing hard physical labor all morning. Deanna stood to the side, watching, trying to get a sense of how much food they went through, how the meal service worked, what would be expected of her. Nathan caught her eye again and gestured to an empty spot on the bench beside him. Deanna hesitated, then moved to sit down. He pushed a bowl of stew toward her. "You should eat too," he said quietly. "Eleanor always makes extra." "Thank you," Deanna said, accepting the bowl, "and thank you for bringing me here this morning. I do not know what would have happened if you had not found me." Nathan shrugged, looking uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Anyone would have done the same." "I do not think that is true," Deanna said, "but I appreciate it nonetheless." They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Nathan spoke again. "Eleanor told me she offered you the job. I am glad you took it. You will do well here. You sound very certain of that." "I am a good judge of character," Nathan said, a hint of amusement in his voice. "And you strike me as someone who does not give up easily, someone who will do what needs to be done, even when things are hard." Deanna felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. "I try." "That is all any of us can do." The other cowboys were starting to finish their meals and head back out to their afternoon work. Nathan stood, carrying his empty bowl to the basin where they were collecting dirty dishes. "I will see you at dinner," he said, settling his hat back on his head. Then he was gone, following the other men out into the bright afternoon sun. Diana helped Eleanor clean up from lunch, paying close attention to where things were stored and how the kitchen area of the bunkhouse was organized. It was less well-equipped than a proper kitchen, with a large wood stove for cooking, a few shelves for supplies, and a table for food preparation. But it was workable. "You will do fine," Eleanor said, as if reading Deanna's thoughts. "The men are not picky. They just want hot food and plenty of it. Breakfast is bacon, eggs, and biscuits usually, unless you want to make pancakes or flapjacks. Lunch is often stew or beans, something that can cook while you do other chores. Dinner is the big meal, usually meat and potatoes and vegetables if we have them. And coffee. These men drink coffee like it is water, so you will want to keep a pot going most of the time." Deanna nodded, committing it all to memory. She had cooked for Thomas, but never for 10 hungry cowboys. The scale was intimidating, but she was determined to prove she could handle it. Over the next few days, Deanna settled into her new routine. She rose before dawn to start breakfast, served the cowboys while they joked and complained good-naturedly about the early hour, then cleaned up while they headed out for the day's work. She spent her mornings preparing lunch and doing laundry, hanging shirts and trousers on the line behind the bunkhouse to dry in the desert sun. Afternoons were for mending, cleaning, and preparing dinner. Evenings, after the dinner dishes were done, were her own. Though she was usually so exhausted, she simply collapsed into her bed. It was hard work, harder than anything Deanna had done before, but it was also satisfying in a way her life with Thomas had never been. She could see the direct results of her labor in the clean bunkhouse, the full bellies of the cowboys, the neatly mended clothes. She was contributing something real, earning her keep through honest work. The cowboys treated her with careful respect, almost overly polite at first, as if afraid of offending her. But as the days passed and they grew more comfortable with her presence, they began to relax, joking with her and complimenting her cooking. Pete told terrible stories from his younger days that always ended with him learning some kind of hard lesson. The brothers Jake and Johnny competed to see who could make her laugh with their antics. And Nathan, quiet Nathan, helped her carry water from the pump when he saw her struggling with the heavy buckets. He fixed the latch on her door when it started sticking. He brought her wildflowers once, a small bunch of desert blooms, and set them on the table in the main bunkhouse without saying a word about it. Deanna tried not to notice the way her heart beat faster when Nathan was around, tried not to look for him among the cowboys at mealtimes, tried not to feel disappointed on the rare occasions when his work kept him away from the ranch through dinner. She was still married, technically, even if Thomas had abandoned her. It was wrong to have feelings for another man, but feelings, Deanna was learning, did not much care about what was proper or wrong. It was a month into her employment at Copper Creek Ranch when things shifted between her and Nathan. December had arrived, bringing colder nights and occasional rain. Deanna had just finished serving dinner and was clearing plates when Sam, the quiet cowboy, spoke up. "Deanna, I heard in town that your husband was spotted in Tucson last week. Thought you might want to know." The plate Deanna was holding slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. The entire bunkhouse went silent. She stood frozen, staring at the broken pieces of crockery, her mind unable to process what Sam had just said. Thomas was in Tucson. Not far away, not gone forever, but in Tucson, less than 100 miles from where she stood. "Deanna," Nathan's voice, concerned, close. He had crossed the room without her noticing. "Are you all right?" "I am fine," she said automatically, kneeling to pick up the broken plate. Her hands were shaking. "I am fine." But she was not fine. She was angry, angrier than she had been since the night Thomas left. He was in Tucson, probably gambling away whatever money he had managed to scrape together, while she was here working herself to exhaustion to survive the disaster he had created. He had left her with nothing, had abandoned her without a second thought, and he was just going on with his life as if she did not exist. Nathan knelt beside her, his hands covering hers, stopping her fumbling attempts to gather the broken pieces. "Let me do this. You are going to cut yourself." Deanna looked up at him, and something in his expression, something soft and concerned and achingly kind, broke through the careful walls she had been building around her emotions. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. "I am sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I should not be crying over broken dishes." "You are not crying over dishes," Nathan said gently. He helped her to her feet, his hand warm and steady on her elbow. The other cowboys were studiously looking anywhere but at them, giving her what privacy they could in the shared space. "Come on, let us go outside for a minute." He guided her out onto the porch of the bunkhouse, where the evening air was cool and clear. Stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Deanna wrapped her arms around herself, trying to stop the tears, trying to regain her composure. "I am sorry," she said again. "That was unprofessional of me." "Stop apologizing," Nathan said, his voice firm but not unkind. "You have a right to your feelings, Deanna. That man destroyed your life and then ran away like a coward. You have every right to be upset." "I thought I was past it," Deanna admitted. "I thought I had moved on, that I was building a new life here. But hearing that he is in Tucson, that he is so close, it just brought it all back. The anger, the hurt, the humiliation." Nathan was quiet for a moment, leaning against the porch railing, his profile silhouetted against the fading light. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "My father was a gambling man, not as bad as your husband maybe, but bad enough. He would win big and lose bigger, and my mother would try to hold everything together. One day, when I was about 15, he lost our farm in a game. Everything we had gone in one night. But unlike Thomas, my father did not run. He stayed, and he had to look at what he had done every single day. Had to watch my mother work herself sick trying to keep us fed. Had to see the disappointment in his children's eyes." Deanna looked at Nathan, surprised by this revelation. He rarely spoke about his past. "Which is worse, do you think?" Nathan continued. To stay and face the consequences of your actions or to run away like Thomas did, I do not know, Deanna said honestly. Both seem like different kinds of cruelty. My father died 3 years later, Nathan said. Drank himself to death, unable to live with what he had done. By then, I was 18 and working, trying to support my mother and younger sisters. When I finally made enough to buy back our old farm, my mother said she did not want it. Too many bad memories. So I gave her the money to start over in California with my sisters, and I came out here to Arizona to make my own way. Do you regret it? Deanna asked. Coming here instead of staying with them? Nathan shook his head. No. I needed distance from all of that. Needed to be somewhere I was not constantly reminded of my father's failures. And I have made a good life here. I am the head wrangler now, make decent money, have a place I am proud to work. It is not what I imagined when I was young, but it is honest, and it is mine. Deanna understood what he was telling her, the message beneath the story, that it was possible to survive disaster, to build something new from the ruins of what came before. That she was not alone in having survived a gambling man's destruction. Thank you, she said softly, for telling me that. It helps, knowing I am not the only one who has been through something like this. You are definitely not alone, Nathan said. He turned to look at her fully, and in the dim light, his eyes were serious. I want you to know something, Deanna. What happened to you was not your fault. You are not responsible for Thomas's choices, and you have nothing to be ashamed of. You are one of the strongest people I have ever met, and I admire the way you have handled everything. Deanna felt her breath catch at his words, at the warmth and sincerity in his voice. They stood there on the porch, just a few feet apart, and Deanna was acutely aware of the space between them, of how easy it would be to close that distance. Nathan, she started, then stopped, not sure what she wanted to say. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken things, and Deanna thought Nathan might close the distance, might touch her, might say something more. But then the bunkhouse door opened and Pete stuck his head out. Sorry to interrupt, but we are ready for coffee whenever you are, Deanna. The spell broke. Nathan stepped back and Deanna turned toward the door, the moment lost. She went inside to serve coffee and dessert, and Nathan followed, and everything went back to normal. But something had shifted between them, something subtle but undeniable. Deanna caught Nathan watching her sometimes when he thought she was not looking, his expression thoughtful and intent. And she found herself watching him too, noticing the way he moved, the sound of his laugh, the kindness in his eyes when he spoke to the younger cowboys. She was falling in love with him, Deanna realized, with equal parts wonder and fear. She, who was still legally married to a man who had abandoned her, was falling in love with a cowboy who had shown her nothing but kindness and respect. It was wrong. It was complicated. It was dangerous. But it was also undeniably true. Winter deepened in the high Arizona desert, bringing cold nights and occasional snow that melted quickly under the strong sun. Christmas came and went, celebrated with a special dinner that Deanna prepared and the cowboys ate with enthusiasm. Eleanor and her husband, Mr. Porter, joined them, and the bunkhouse was filled with laughter and terrible singing and a warmth that had nothing to do with the wood stove. Nathan gave Deanna a gift, a set of hair combs carved from wood, simple but beautifully made. She treasured them, wearing them whenever she dressed her hair up instead of leaving it in the practical braids she usually wore for work. January of 1884 brought with it cold, clear skies and hard frosts. Deanna had been at Copper Creek Ranch for nearly 3 months, and she had fallen into a comfortable rhythm with her work and with the men she cooked for. She had even saved a small amount of money from her wages, carefully storing it away for a future she was not yet sure of. She thought about Thomas less often now, the anger and hurt fading into a dull ache that only flared up occasionally. She had no idea where he was or what he was doing, and she tried not to care. He had made his choices, and she was making hers. One evening in late January, after dinner was finished and the cowboys had dispersed to their various evening activities, Nathan lingered behind, helping Diana with the dishes even though it was not his responsibility. "You do not have to help," Diana said, washing a plate and handing it to him to dry. "I can manage." "I know you can," Nathan said, "but I want to help." They worked in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Nathan spoke again. "Diana, I need to talk to you about something." The serious tone of his voice made Diana's hands still in the soapy water. "All right." Nathan set down the towel he was using and turned to face her fully. "I have been thinking about this for a while now, trying to decide if it was appropriate to say anything, but I cannot keep quiet anymore." Diana's heart began to beat faster. "Nathan." "I know your situation is complicated," Nathan continued. "I know you are still technically married, even though that man abandoned you. I know this is probably not proper or appropriate. But Diana, I have feelings for you, real feelings. And I needed you to know that." Diana stood frozen, her hands still in the water, staring at Nathan's earnest face. Part of her wanted to pretend she did not understand, to laugh it off, to protect them both from the complications this could cause. But she could not do that, not to him, not when he had been so honest. "I have feelings for you too," she said quietly. "I have tried not to, have told myself it was wrong, but I cannot help it. You have been so kind to me, Nathan. You have shown me what a good man looks like, and I cannot help but love you for it." The word hung in the air between them. Love. She had said love. Nathan stepped closer, his hand coming up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing away a drop of water there. "I love you, Diana. I know it has not been that long, and I know everything is complicated, but I love you, and I want to be with you if you will have me." "I am still married," Diana said, even as she leaned into his touch. "Even though Thomas abandoned me, even though he destroyed everything, legally I am still his wife. I could not ask you to be involved in such a complicated situation." "You are not asking," Nathan said firmly. "I am offering, and I do not care about the legal complications. As far as I am concerned, Thomas Sinclair gave up any claim to you the night he walked out. You are free, Diana, and you deserve to be happy. I want to make you happy if you will let me." Diana felt tears welling in her eyes, but these were different from the bitter tears she had shed over Thomas. These were tears of relief and hope and joy. "I want that too. I want to be with you, Nathan. I love you." Nathan smiled, a genuine, full smile that transformed his usually serious face into something beautiful. Then he leaned down and kissed her, gentle and sweet, his lips warm against hers. Diana melted into the kiss, her wet hands coming up to rest on his chest, feeling his heart beating strong and steady beneath her palms. This was what kissing should feel like, she thought. Not the desperate, grasping kisses Thomas had given her, but this gentle, respectful affection that asked rather than took. When they finally pulled apart, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "We will figure everything out," he said softly. "The legal issues with Thomas, what people will think, all of it. We will figure it out together." "Together," Diana repeated, and the word felt like a promise. They kept their relationship quiet at first, not hiding it exactly, but not announcing it either. The other cowboys likely suspected something, given the way Nathan and Diana looked at each other, the way Nathan always found excuses to help her, the way Diana's face lit up whenever he entered a room. But if they knew, they kept it to themselves, respecting their privacy. Eleanor, however, was not so easily fooled. She cornered Deanna one morning in early February while they were working together in the main house kitchen. "So you and Nathan are courting," Eleanor said, not a question but a statement. Diana felt her face flush. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who knows what to look for," Eleanor said with a knowing smile. "And I approve, in case you were wondering. Nathan is a good man, one of the best I have ever known. He will treat you right." "I am still married," Deanna said, the concern that had been nagging at her finally voiced. "What if Thomas comes back? What if he causes trouble?" Eleanor's expression turned serious. "Has Thomas tried to contact you at all since he left?" "No, nothing." "Then as far as I am concerned, he has abandoned you, which in some territories would be grounds for divorce." "Have you thought about pursuing that?" Diana shook her head. "I would not know how, and I do not have money for a lawyer." Eleanor was quiet for a moment, then made a decision. "Let me talk to Mr. Porter. He knows a lawyer in Phoenix who might be able to help. With Thomas having abandoned you and gambled away your home, you should have grounds for a divorce. It will take time and money, but we might be able to figure something out." Hope bloomed in Diana's chest. "You would help me with that?" "Why?" "Because I like you, and I like Nathan, and you both deserve to be happy," Eleanor said simply. "And because I cannot stand to see a woman trapped by a worthless man's actions. You should be free to make your own choices about your future." Over the following weeks, Eleanor made good on her promise. Mr. Porter contacted his lawyer friend in Phoenix, and a complex legal process began. Deanna had to provide details about Thomas, about his gambling, about him abandoning her. She had to sign papers and answer questions, all of which stirred up painful memories. But Nathan was there through all of it, supporting her, holding her hand when things got difficult, reminding her that she was strong enough to get through this. The lawyer explained that while divorce was not common, cases of abandonment and financial ruin could provide grounds, especially with multiple witnesses willing to testify to Thomas's gambling and his departure. It would take months, possibly longer, but it was possible. In the meantime, life at the ranch continued. Deanna cooked and cleaned, Nathan worked with the horses and cattle, and in the evening when work was done, they would sit together on the porch of the bunkhouse and talk about everything and nothing. Nathan told her about his dreams of one day owning his own small ranch. Nothing grand, just enough land for some cattle and horses and a family. Deanna talked about wanting a real home again, something stable and permanent, a place where she could put down roots and never worry about it being taken away. "I want to give you that," Nathan said one evening in March, as they sat watching the sunset paint the desert sky in shades of orange and purple. "A home, stability, everything you have lost. I want to give you a life where you never have to be afraid again." "You already have," Deanna said softly. "You have given me safety and kindness and love. That is more than I ever thought I would have again." Nathan took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "When the divorce is final, when you are truly free, I want to marry you, Deanna. I want to make this official, make you my wife in every way. I want to build that life with you." Deanna felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they were happy tears. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I want that too. I want to be your wife, Nathan. I want to build a life with you." They kissed there on the porch as the sun set, and Deanna thought that maybe, after everything, she had finally found something real and good and lasting. The divorce took longer than Deanna had hoped. Legal processes moved slowly, especially when one party had completely disappeared and could not be located to serve papers. The lawyer had to prove abandonment, had to gather testimonies from people in Vulture City who had witnessed Thomas's gambling and Deanna's situation. It was expensive and complicated, and Diana felt guilty about the money the Porters were spending on her behalf. "Consider it an investment in your future," Mr. Porter said when she tried to thank him. "You are a good worker, and you have made Alina happy by taking some of the burden off her shoulders. Besides, Nathan is like a son to us. We want to see him happy too." Summer came to Arizona, bringing intense heat and long, exhausting days. Deanna adapted her cooking schedule to work in the early morning and late evening when the bunkhouse was not quite so stifling. The Cowboys came back from their work sunburned and exhausted, drinking gallons of water and coffee. Nathan had been promoted to foreman, a recognition of his hard work and leadership abilities. It came with a small pay increase and more responsibility, which he took seriously. He was out on the range more often now, managing the other cowboys, making decisions about which pastures to use and when to move the cattle. Deanna was proud of him, but missed the easy evenings they had shared before his promotion. Then, in late August, everything changed again. Deanna was in the main house kitchen, helping Alina prepare preserves from the vegetables they had been growing all summer, when Mr. Porter entered with a telegram in his hand. His expression was serious. "Deanna, this came for you," he said, handing her the thin paper. Deanna's hands shook as she opened it. Telegrams were expensive and usually meant important news. She read the message once, twice, unable to process what it said. "What is it?" Alina asked, concerned. "It is from the lawyer in Phoenix," Deanna said, her voice sounding strange in her own ears. "The divorce has been granted. I am no longer married to Thomas Sinclair. I am free." The words hung in the air, enormous in their implications. Free. She was free. Alina let out a whoop of joy and pulled Deanna into a tight hug. "This is wonderful news. Oh, Deanna, I am so happy for you." Mr. Porter smiled, relief evident on his weathered face. "Congratulations. You have earned this fresh start." Deanna felt tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling so wide her cheeks hurt. "I need to tell Nathan. Where is he?" "Out at the north pasture with the herd," Mr. Porter said, "but he should be back by dinner time." Deanna could not wait that long. She borrowed one of the horses, something she had learned to do over the months at the ranch, and rode out to find Nathan. The August sun beat down mercilessly, but she barely noticed, her heart soaring with joy and relief. She found him near the north pasture, working with 2 other cowboys to repair a section of fence. He looked up at the sound of hoofbeats, his expression shifting from surprise to concern when he saw it was her. "Deanna, what is wrong?" he called out, already moving toward her. Deanna dismounted, her legs shaking with emotion and exertion. "Nothing is wrong, everything is right." "Nathan, the divorce came through. I am free. I am not married anymore." For a moment, Nathan just stared at her, processing the information. Then his face broke into the biggest smile Deanna had ever seen from him. He crossed the remaining distance between them in 3 long strides and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around while she laughed and cried at the same time. "You are free," he said, setting her down but not letting go, his hands framing her face. "You are really free." "I am really free," Deanna confirmed, "which means that offer you made about getting married if it still stands." "It absolutely still stands," Nathan said. "Deanna Sinclair, no, just Deanna, will you marry me? Will you be my wife?" "Yes," Deanna said, laughing and crying and more happy than she had been in years. "Yes, I will marry you, Nathan Overby. I would be honored to be your wife." Nathan kissed her there in the hot August sun, in front of the other 2 cowboys who cheered and whistled. And Deanna thought that maybe all the pain and struggle had been worth it to bring her to this moment. They were married in early September of 1884, in a simple ceremony in Vulture City, with the ranch community in attendance. Alina cried happy tears and fussed over Deanna's dress, which was new, purchased with some of Diana's saved wages and fitted perfectly to her figure. Nathan wore his best clothes and looked so handsome that Diana could barely breathe when she saw him waiting for her. The ceremony was performed by a traveling preacher who came through Vulture City once a month. Diana promised to love and honor Nathan, and Nathan promised the same to her, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan kissed her with such tenderness and joy that Diana felt her heart might burst. The reception was held at the ranch, with food and music and dancing. The Cowboys cleaned up remarkably well and took turns dancing with the new Mrs. Overby. Even old Pete, who claimed his dancing days were behind him, took a turn around the improvised dance floor with Diana while Nathan watched with an indulgent smile. As the sun set and the party began to wind down, Nathan took Diana's hand and led her away from the crowd. They walked together in the gathering dusk, heading toward the small cabin that Mr. Porter had helped Nathan build over the summer. It was a wedding gift from the ranch owner, a place for the newlyweds to start their life together. The cabin was small but well built, with a main room that served as kitchen and living area, a separate bedroom, and even a small porch. It sat on a rise overlooking the ranch, with a view of the desert stretching out toward the mountains in the distance. "What do you think?" Nathan asked, watching her face anxiously as she took it all in. "It is perfect," Diana said honestly. "It is home." Nathan smiled and lifted her in his arms, carrying her over the threshold as tradition dictated. He set her down gently inside their new home, and Diana looked around at the simple furniture, the clean floors, the curtains Alina had helped her sew. It was modest, but it was theirs, truly theirs, and no one could take it away. "I love you," Nathan said, pulling her into his arms. "I will spend the rest of my life trying to make you happy." "You already have," Diana said, reaching up to touch his face. "You gave me back my life, Nathan. You showed me what love is supposed to be. I love you so much." They kissed, and Nathan lifted her again, carrying her to their bedroom, to their marriage bed, and Diana went willingly, happily, ready to start this new chapter of her life with the man she loved. The months that followed were the happiest of Diana's life. She continued cooking for the bunkhouse, but now she had Nathan to come home to every night, to share meals with, to talk and laugh with, to hold in the quiet darkness. They settled into married life with surprising ease, complementing each other in ways Diana had never experienced with Thomas. Nathan was steady and reliable, always doing what he said he would do. He consulted Diana on decisions, valued her opinion, never made her feel small or foolish. He helped with chores around the cabin without being asked, split wood and carried water and mended things that broke. And he loved her with a patience and tenderness that made Diana feel cherished in a way she had never known. Winter came and went, and then spring arrived, bringing wildflowers and new calves and warmer weather. In March of 1885, Diana realized her monthly courses were late. She waited another week before saying anything to Alina, afraid to hope, afraid to be wrong. But she was not wrong. By April, there was no denying it. She was pregnant. Diana told Nathan one evening after dinner as they sat together on their porch watching the sunset. She was nervous, not sure how he would react, wondering if it was too soon, if they were ready. "I have some news," she said, her hands fidgeting in her lap. Nathan turned to look at her, concerned. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong," Diana assured him quickly. "At least I do not think anything is wrong. Nathan, I am with child. We are going to have a baby." Nathan's expression went through several changes in rapid succession: surprise, confusion, comprehension, and then pure, unadulterated joy. "A baby, we are having a baby," Diana nodded, tears filling her eyes. "Yes, sometime in the fall, I think, maybe October or November." Nathan pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, and Deanna could feel him trembling slightly. When he pulled back, there were tears in his eyes, too. "I am going to be a father. We are going to be parents." "Are you happy?" Deanna asked, needing to hear him say it. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Nathan said, his voice thick with emotion. "Deanna, you have given me everything. A home, love, and now a child. I am the luckiest man alive." They held each other on the porch as the sun disappeared below the horizon, both crying, both laughing, both overwhelmed with joy at the new life they had created together. The pregnancy was not easy. Deanna suffered from morning sickness well into her 4th month, and the Arizona summer heat made the later months uncomfortable. But Nathan was attentive and loving, bringing her water when she was sick, rubbing her swollen feet in the evenings, building a cradle for the baby with his own hands. Alina fussed over her like a mother hen, insisting Deanna reduce her workload and rest more. The Cowboys were surprisingly sweet, treating her like she was made of glass and might break at any moment. Jake and Johnny competed to bring her things, and old Pete told stories about when his own children were born, back before he had become a wandering ranch hand. As summer gave way to fall, Diana's belly grew round and full. She and Nathan would lie in bed at night with his hand on her stomach, feeling the baby move and kick, both of them marveling at the miracle of it. "What should we name the baby?" Nathan asked one night in late October. "I do not know," Deanna admitted. "I have thought about it, but nothing seems quite right. If it is a boy, I would like to name him after my grandfather," Nathan said. "His name was Nicholas. He was a good man, one of the few in my family who never touched cards or dice. He worked hard his whole life and died knowing he had provided well for his family." "Nicholas Overby," Deanna said, trying it out. "I like that. And if it is a girl, that should be your choice," Nathan said. "You are doing all the hard work growing this baby. You should name a daughter." Deanna thought about it, running through names in her mind. "What about Dorothy? I always liked that name, Dorothy Overby." "Dorothy," Nathan repeated, smiling. "That is perfect." The baby came on a cold night in early November, arriving 3 weeks early and in a hurry. Deanna's water broke while she was preparing dinner, and within hours, the pains were coming strong and close together. Alina and the midwife from Vulture City attended the birth while Nathan paced outside the cabin, nearly wearing a hole in the porch from his worried walking back and forth. Just after midnight, a baby's cry split the night air. Nathan froze, his heart in his throat, waiting. Then Alina opened the door, her face split in a huge smile. "You have a son, Nathan. A healthy baby boy, and Deanna is tired but well." Nathan pushed past her into the cabin, his eyes searching for Deanna. She was propped up in bed, exhausted and pale but smiling, and in her arms, wrapped in a blanket Alina had knitted, was a tiny red-faced baby with a shock of dark hair. "Meet Nicholas," Deanna said softly as Nathan approached. "Nicholas William Overby." Nathan sat carefully on the edge of the bed, staring at his son in wonder. The baby was so small, so perfect, with tiny fingers and toes and a scrunched-up face. As Nathan watched, Nicholas opened his eyes, revealing dark blue irises that would likely change color in the coming weeks. "Can I hold him?" Nathan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Diana carefully transferred the baby to Nathan's arms, showing him how to support the tiny head. Nathan looked down at his son, at this new life he and Deanna had created, and felt tears streaming down his face. "Hello, Nicholas," he said softly. "I am your father. I promise I will always protect you. I promise I will never let you down." Deanna reached up to touch Nathan's face, wiping away his tears. "You are going to be a wonderful father." "We are going to be wonderful parents," Nathan corrected. Together. Nicholas grew quickly, thriving in the love and attention his parents lavished on him. Deanna reduced her work at the bunkhouse even further, focusing on caring for her infant son. Nathan would come home for lunch just to hold Nicholas, to watch him sleep, to marvel at every tiny change and development. The cabin filled with the sounds of a baby, crying and cooing and babbling. Deanna had never been happier, despite the exhaustion and the challenges of new motherhood. This was what she had always wanted, a real family built on love and respect and partnership. By the time Nicholas was 6 months old, he was a chubby, happy baby with Nathan's blue-green eyes and Diana's dark hair. He loved being outside, would stop fussing the moment someone carried him onto the porch where he could feel the breeze and see the wide Arizona sky. "He is going to be a cowboy like his father," Alina predicted, watching Nicholas's fascination with Nathan's horse. "God help me if that is true," Deanna said, but she was smiling. If Nicholas grew up to be even half the man his father was, she would be proud. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Nathan continued his work as foreman, Diana managed both motherhood and her reduced duties at the bunkhouse, and Nicholas grew bigger and more curious every day. They were a family, complete and happy. 2 years after Nicholas was born, Diana found herself pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Nathan was just as attentive, just as excited, and Nicholas, now a toddling 2-year-old, seemed fascinated by his mother's growing belly. "Baby," he would say, patting Diana's stomach with his chubby hands. "Baby, come, soon," Diana would tell him. "Soon you will have a brother or sister to play with." The baby, a daughter they named Dorothy Ann, arrived in the spring of 1888. She was smaller than Nicholas had been, but just as healthy, with wispy blonde hair and her father's eyes. Nicholas was initially uncertain about the crying bundle that had taken over so much of his parents' attention. But within days, he had appointed himself her protector, bringing her toys and patting her gently whenever she cried. With 2 children and a household to manage, Deanna finally gave up her work at the bunkhouse entirely. Mr. Porter hired a young man from town to take over the cooking duties, and Deanna focused all her energy on her family. Nathan, with money saved over years of steady work and careful planning, began talking seriously about buying their own land. The dream he had shared with Diana years ago of owning a small ranch was beginning to look achievable. Mr. Porter supported the plan, even helped Nathan scout out properties. In the fall of 1888, Nathan and Deanna purchased 80 acres about 5 miles from Copper Creek Ranch. It was not much, but it had good water access, enough grazing land for a small herd, and room to expand. Nathan built a larger house there, with help from the Cowboys who had become like family. It had 3 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, a large main room, and a wide porch that looked out over their own land. Moving day was bittersweet. Deanna would miss living so close to Alina and the ranch that had given her a second chance. But she was also thrilled to have a real home, a place that was truly theirs, that no one could ever take away. "What should we call it?" Nathan asked as they stood together on the porch of their new home, watching Nicholas chase chickens around the yard while Dorothy napped inside. "Call what? The ranch. Every ranch needs a name." Deanna thought about it, considering. She thought about how far she had come from that cold barn where Nathan had found her, how much her life had changed, how blessed she was. What about Second Chance Ranch? Because this place, this life, it is our second chance. Both of us got second chances, and this is what we built from them. Nathan smiled, pulling her close. "Second Chance Ranch, I like that. It is perfect." The years that followed were full and rich. Nathan built up their herd slowly but steadily, buying cattle when prices were good, selling when the market was high. Diana managed the household and raised their children, teaching Nicholas to read and write, watching Dorothy grow from a baby into a bright, curious little girl. They had challenges, of course. There were dry years when water was scarce, and they worried about the cattle. There was the year Nicholas got sick with fever, and Diana barely slept for a week, watching over him until the fever finally broke. There was the time a mountain lion killed 2 calves before Nathan managed to track and kill the predator. But through it all, they had each other. Nathan and Diana faced every challenge together, supporting each other, loving each other, building a life that was solid and real and good. In 1891, Diana gave birth to their 3rd child, another son they named Samuel James. Nicholas, now 6 years old, was proud to be a big brother, and 4-year-old Dorothy was fascinated by the new baby. The house was loud and chaotic and full of love. Nathan added on to the house, building another bedroom and expanding the kitchen. The ranch prospered, growing from 80 acres to 160 as they purchased adjacent land. They hired 2 cowboys to help with the work, young men who reminded Diana of Nathan when she had first met him, hardworking and honest. Diana sometimes thought about Thomas, wondering what had become of him. She had heard rumors over the years that he had been seen in various towns, always gambling, always losing, always moving on. She felt pity for him sometimes, for the life he had thrown away, but mostly she just felt grateful. If Thomas had been a better man, she never would have ended up in that barn. She never would have met Nathan. She never would have built this beautiful life. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1894, Nathan gave Diana a gift, a small painting he had commissioned of their family. It showed Nathan and Diana with their 3 children in front of their ranch house, the desert landscape stretching out behind them. It was not fancy, but it captured something real and true about their life together. "So you will always remember," Nathan said as Diana studied the painting with tears in her eyes, "how far we have come, how much we have built together." "I could never forget," Diana said, kissing him. "You saved my life, Nathan Overby. You gave me everything." "No," Nathan said, touching her face gently. "We saved each other, and we built this life together, every bit of it." Diana looked at the painting again, at the family they had created, at the home they had built, at the life they were living. Nathan was right. They had built this together, from nothing, from ashes, from a chance encounter in an abandoned barn. She thought about the woman she had been then, frightened and alone and ashamed, hiding in that barn with no idea what would happen next. If she could go back and tell that woman what the future held, she would hardly believe it. But it was all real, every bit of it, from the children playing in the yard to the man standing beside her to the ranch that bore their name, Second Chance Ranch. A name that told their whole story, all the pain and struggle and joy and love, all of it leading to this moment, this life, this happiness. The children grew up strong and happy on the ranch. Nicholas inherited his father's love of horses and his mother's determination. Dorothy was clever and quick, always asking questions about everything. Samuel was the peacemaker, gentle and kind, with a gift for making people laugh. As the years passed and the 19th century gave way to the 20th, Nathan and Diana grew older together, their love deepening with each shared challenge and joy. They added more land to the ranch, built better facilities, watched their children grow into capable young adults who helped run the family business. In 1903, Nicholas married a girl from Vulture City, a teacher named Margaret who Diana adored immediately. They built a house on the ranch property, and within a year, Diana was a grandmother, holding her first grandchild with tears of joy streaming down her face. Nathan stood beside her, his arm around her shoulders, both of them marveling at the continuation of the family they had built. Dorothy eventually went to Phoenix to study nursing, something almost unheard of for a woman from a small ranch, but Nathan and Diana encouraged her dreams. She came home often, bringing stories of the city and the hospital where she worked. Eventually, she married a doctor and settled in Phoenix, though she visited the ranch regularly. Samuel stayed on the ranch, working alongside his father, learning everything Nathan could teach him about cattle and horses and the land. He was content there, happy with the simple life of a rancher, and Nathan could not have been prouder. As Nathan approached 60 and Diana 55, they began to slow down, turning over more of the daily operations to Nicholas and Samuel. They still lived in the main house, still oversaw the major decisions, but they also had time now to simply enjoy what they had built. On warm evenings, they would sit together on the porch, watching the sun set over their land, holding hands the way they had done for more than 20 years of marriage. They would talk about the children and grandchildren, about the ranch, about memories from their early days together. "Do you ever regret it?" Nathan asked one evening in 1907, 23 years after they had married. "The way things happened, I mean, the hardship you went through." Diana considered the question seriously. "I regret that I had to suffer through my marriage to Thomas. I regret the pain and the shame. But if I had not gone through all of that, I never would have ended up in that barn. You never would have found me. We never would have built this life. So no, I do not regret how things happened, because they led me to you." Nathan lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I love you, Diana. I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you," Diana said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "My cowboy who found me in the abandoned barn and gave me back my life." They sat together in the fading light, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built something lasting and true from the ruins of disaster. Their children carried on their legacy, their grandchildren bore their names, and their love story, born in hardship and nurtured through dedication and faith, would be told in the family for generations to come. The sun set fully, stars beginning to appear in the vast Arizona sky. Somewhere on the ranch, cattle lowed softly. In the barn, horses shifted in their stalls. Inside the house, a clock chimed the hour. And on the porch, Nathan and Diana Overby sat together, hands entwined, hearts full, living proof that sometimes the worst moments in life can lead to the very best, that love can bloom in the most unlikely places, and that second chances, when seized with courage and hope, can lead to happiness beyond anything imagined. Their story was not one of fairy tale perfection, but of real people facing real challenges and choosing every day to love each other, to support each other, to build something meaningful together. It was a story of resilience and redemption, of finding light in darkness, of two broken people making each other whole. And it was a story that would continue long after them, in the children they raised, the ranch they built, and the legacy of love and strength they left behind. Second Chance Ranch would stand for generations, a testament to what can be built when people refuse to give up, when they choose hope over despair, when they open their hearts to the possibility of new beginnings. Diana had been found living in an abandoned barn by a cowboy named Nathan, broken and alone and afraid. But that had not been the end of her story. It had been the beginning of something beautiful, something lasting, something true. And as she sat with her husband under the stars, surrounded by the life they had built together, Diana knew with absolute certainty that every moment of hardship had been worth it, because it had all led her here, to this place, to this man, to this love that would endure.